see the chat. If anybody's there and can tell me if you can hear me, that'd be great. Can anybody? There are 2 people online, 2 likes, so I assume 4 viewers. So I assume you are able to see me. Hope you can hear me. I don't have any feedback. So it's 17 o'clock in Berlin time, at least. Hello, everybody. Hello, who is coming. And welcome to my messy kitchen. Great. Hello, Adam. So today I want to talk to you about 2 things. Yesterday I tried to have this stream, the live stream, but I had some troubles. I have no idea why. So I hope today we won't run into any troubles. We are talking about the Camembert and why did I change my recipe. So many people might have seen online how to make Camembert with a very straightforward recipe. Just blend everything, put the cultures, and you're done. But since for a couple of months I changed that, and I want to talk a little bit about the reason why. And also I want to use as a hint because I love cashew yogurt, but not anything that you've seen on YouTube before, except you've seen my new yogurt recipe, cashew yogurt in the sense. So let's talk a little bit about this Camembert. So I want you to take a look of, there's some blue cheese that happens, but that's not a big deal. So this cheese was pretty firm and now it is extremely creamy. And the reason why it's so creamy is because it's been cooked. The cashew milk was cooked before, and then it enables that the enzymes in the mold can break down the proteins, just like a dairy camembert. Also, one thing that you might notice, the rind, it's a no cheese, but the rind is not too thick, as most of the cashew camembert cheese would become, because there's a lot of water. That means that the sugars, the carbohydrates, not the sugars, but really the carbohydrates, the starches in the mold are diluted, so you don't have that bomb of food for the camembert. So yesterday I did camembert yogurt. I won't have a proper video because the recording was not proper yesterday. So let's go from the beginning today. What happened? So if you're first time here at any of the Cashewbert videos, welcome. I'm doing on YouTube, so maybe more new people will see it, but usually we have the Facebook group with all the questions, all people who already know a little bit about Cashewbert. They can ask questions, and they've seen our videos, they've read our recipes, so it would be a bit more focused. It's not just like a YouTube tutorial for everybody. It's a bit more centered that you have some information already. You just don't come, you don't know anything, and just watch a 5 minutes video and think that you know everything about vegan cheese making, because that's not the case in my videos, because there's a lot of chemistry, there's a lot of background information that I like to share, I like people to understand. So there is on my video, 5 minutes video, Cashew Camembert, an old one, and I want to make the new one. But now I want to explain why I changed the recipe. Why, if you go to books.cashewbert.com and you see this new booklet, you won't find the old recipe anymore, because I wanted to have a very creamy Camembert, and in order to do that, I needed I learned that when you cook the cashew milk, you get much more properties of the proteins of the milk itself available for the molds, for the enzymes, and so on. And that all started because in the beginning, when you make almond milk, you have to cook. When you make tofu, you need to have soy milk, and you need to cook the milk, and then you can curdle. And it felt like nobody was doing it with cashews, and I thought it was just like an exception. But after experimenting a lot with different types of nuts and seeds and beans, I realized that that's not the case. Actually, we've been doing wrong. It's not completely wrong to make to not cook the cashew milk, but then you are skipping a very important process step in order to get all the potential of the cashew milk available for the enzymes. You need to denaturate the proteins. You need to pre-cook the starches, and all that helps for a better texture and a better flavor of the cheese. But then, just to have like this concept, I wanted to start with the yogurt, and then I go a little bit to the camembert. But just so you have an idea, these are camemberts that I made yesterday. I haven't checked it completely. It dried out because I just left it unattended. But this is a cheese. I didn't do anything. It was sitting on the counter, and you can see it's pretty firm. It's pretty firm. And this cheese, after it ages, it becomes super creamy. That's the second part of this video. And the first one is we are gonna make a cashew milk, and this is the yogurt from the milk I made yesterday, and we're gonna do it again, exactly the same recipe, so you can see how different it looks like from the process of cooking, making the milk and cooking. Most recipes for cashew ask for it. Doesn't look like a lot, but this is 4 times water to 1 part cashew. So it's a lot of water compared to whatever you see on the internet for a cashew milk, and that's the milk that I get, that you see later how creamy it gets. So let me just blend this. I wanted to show you the ratio here. Because here it's thinner, it looks a bit okay. Yeah, the yogurt you can get, for example, anywhere, and there is some tips on the if you're not from Europe. There are alternatives if you're in the US, Canada. Australia is a bit more complicated, New Zealand, but if you're in the US, there are options. So right now, just making a yogurt, and this is, you can do wherever you are, because it's just yogurt cultures, just to get the first step. And I can't tell you there's nothing like this in almost anywhere with just a simple recipe and get such a good yogurt. So let's just blend this first. Because I don't know if you can hear well, but because it's a lot of water, you don't need a super, like a high-speed blender for this. You can use just a normal blender. But it will take longer for it to mix if you're not using a high-speed blender. But in this case, you don't need that of a great milk. So when I'm making So you don't need a blender to make a great milk. So right now, like this is the texture I'm looking for. It's super liquidy. It's super um, diluted, but it doesn't look like it when you get, like I said, it's the same product. It's exactly the same recipe that I did yesterday, and this is the final texture. That's only because you are cooking the milk, but by cooking, I mean something other than really just put in hot water. If you just cook in a pot directly on the stovetop, you might burn, overcook, or become too thick or uneven. So what I'm gonna do is to do a double boiler. So there is a big pot with water, and there is this small pot. What I like is to have something flat, and that fits well into the big pot. So first, I need to cook this. And what do I mean by cooking? I don't mean that you need to control the temperature. This is hot water. I'm putting the other pot, and now I'm just gonna stir it for a couple of minutes. So you have this texture, and now I'm going to thick it up. And it's there are a few things here. It takes a few minutes. So in the meantime, I want to explain what do I mean about cooking. So cashews are a lot of starches. It's the most thing that the cashews contain are starches. It has quite good proteins and fat and some sugars. And when you work with those elements, so the sugars are the what is available for the bacteria to eat. You have the proteins, which you curdle. You have the fats to make it a kind of a rich mouthfeel, and you have the starches in the case of cashews, which is what usually you make pudding or something. Um, but the starches will also be food for the molds. So the bacteria, even though the bacteria cannot eat those starches, the mold can break them down, and then it would become sugars, and those sugars, especially maltose, and those sugars can be eaten by yeast, bacteria, and so on. So in opposite, like different from what a dairy milk, you would have quite like leftover sugars, not that much of lactose in the case of dairy milk. In the cheese, you have a lot of potential sugars in the case of or carbohydrates that can be broken down into sugars and that can be consumed by bacteria or other microorganisms. So it is a tricky ingredient. That's why you cannot just simply use a dairy method. There's many reasons for that, but one of them is that on the Camembert, you have a lot of sugars, and that's why also vegan cheese can get quite wrong in the case of growing too thick or getting all sorts of molds, because the sugar availability or the carbohydrates available for um, unwanted microorganisms is very high. Um, so I put for a few minutes here. I could check with a thermometer what the temperature are. I usually like those kind of candy thermometer that you just stick here, but I forgot that at another space and I didn't get the new one that I ordered. So I'm just using this kind of thermometer, but I find this kind, it takes too long. Um, and then those electric ones, sometimes they behave a bit weirdly with my kind of stovetop. So if you have like fire burning a gas stovetop, that shouldn't be a problem. But I find that with electric, and this stovetop is a bit unclear, and with this one works a little bit better. So I also like to use something that is, this is a spoon, but I used to have also a spatula that is like much flatter. Um, I don't have it right now. And I don't like to do this with a silicone spatula because of this, it's too flexible. And then when it starts to burn at the bottom of the pot, this cannot scrape properly. So ideally you would have something very flat. This is round, so it's not ideal, but at least it's a metal. I find it that metal scrapes better than silicone or something. And then now it is still very liquidy, but you want to cook this to a certain temperature. And you don't just want to forget about it. You have, like I said, the cashew milk has a lot of starches and a lot of proteins. And the cooking is for two reasons. The most important one is to cook the proteins to denaturate it. The proteins are very, very compact, and when you cook it, it will loosen up, and by doing that, other enzymes can act on that protein better. And when you just make a milk and do not cook it like you would with soy milk to make tofu, or almond to make almond cheese or something, you need to cook before denaturate the protein before you can actually work further with enzymes and so on. And that's the same with cashews, even though nobody do it, because cashews can curdle to a certain extent, or can firm up because of the starches. But that is just drying out the cheese or the yogurt. And what I want is something that is very liquidy. In this case, for the yogurt and the cashew camembert, of course, you use more cashews and less water, so the ratio is different. So first, you want a temperature again to denaturate the proteins and not overcook the starches. And to do that, you need about, I only have it in Celsius, but it's 70 to 80 degrees Celsius. I don't know how much is that in Fahrenheit, but you want to have this range before, if it's too higher than 80 degrees Celsius, what you have is that the proteins, the starches will cook too much. And if you have something less than 70, 72, 73 degrees Celsius, what happens is that the protein won't denaturate enough. So you don't have the benefits of the cooking. So you want something in between. And how much depends on your needs, on your recipe. I just go for the middle. 75 works fine for me. But if it's like I see that I'm struggling to have just to reach 75, only 73, I just stop it. If I see that, oh, it went up to 80, I put it out, and that's fine. It's not the end of the world because the temperature was not achieved by 75. Of course, if you're doing professionally, or if you want to really go for a perfect texture, then you would go for a more precise temperature, and then you don't go too high on the double boiling. You really control better the temperature here. Another thing that I want to say is that depending on the cashews you are using, it might create a different result. So in my case here, I'm using cashews from Vietnam, and when I use my cashews from Brazil, they are much softer. I think they have, I don't know if it's less protein, or the starches are different, or because it's a higher temperature process. I have no idea why, but they don't become as firm as the cashews from Vietnam that I have here. So depending on where you are, do it following my recipes. All these recipes are in the booklet, so books.cashewbert.com. You can just go there and look for the booklet for the recipes, for the full recipes. I'm just going to show you and talk about the concepts now that you get for them. So cashews, depending on what kind of cashews you're using, you might get different results. So you need to adapt the amount of water. That only applies for water. If you feel like, oh, I did everything, reached the 75 degrees on a good thermometer. I find that sometimes the thermometer are not really precise, and still didn't get it the way that the recipe expects for it, might put too much less water, or if you find that it's too firm, then you might need to add a little bit more water. So don't take my recipes as the perfect, but rather than guidelines. And because I know it's so tricky to get it right, it's not like something that is a milk that usually has very similar balance and that is standardized by the government and so on, how much protein, fat, and so on. This is not the same as cashews, so every cashew might behave a little bit different, so we don't have that much control. In my old recipe, you don't really need to worry about this. With the new recipe, you need to, because you want to achieve a different type of texture. So you can see now it's firming up. And it's firming up for two reasons. The first one is because of the protein denaturation. You might see, for example, almond milk, that is very clear how when you cook it, that it curdles on homemade almond milk. But of course, the starches are also cooking, and that's why it's also thickening up a little bit different than almond milk would do. And because of the starches, also you can't have kind of a Greek yogurt by draining. So if you have the yogurt here and you want to thicken it up, you cannot drain it. You cannot just put it in a sieve with a cloth and try to drain it, because the starches will just keep the moisture. The maximum, like what you will get, is actually to see everything go away. Which in milk, in dairy milk or almond or soy milk, or even almond milk, you don't have the starches, so it wouldn't soak up the water and keep it. It will actually have a structure like a network of the proteins that will allow the drainage. Not with this one. Cashew yogurt doesn't drain. So if you want something firmer, you just add less water. So I think that we are almost at the right temperature. So I just double check. And you don't need always a thermometer. After you did 3-4 times at the same product, you kind of learn what texture you're expecting it to be. So you don't need to really keep checking the temperature all the time. In the beginning, you need, because you don't want to go over 80 degrees, but and you want like to have like the heat at medium heat, not too high, not too low. So I already have I have 70 degrees. I wait for another minute and stir it, and should be fine. And now I can pour it here. I could wait for 75, but then I want to move on here, and it will work. But with 72, it'll be a bit more liquidy. If you go 75, it'll be a bit firmer, and if you go up to 80 degrees, it'll be quite firmer. So one thing that you want to look for is how much water you add. So you can control the texture by that. And the second one, what temperature you're cooking. If you cook at higher temperature, it will be firmer. If you cook at lower temperature, will be less firmer. But don't forget, you need to denaturate the proteins if you want to achieve the full potential of the milk. So you need above 70 degrees. So now, what I usually would do is to pour here in a jar, or even the pot, directly on a cold water bath. I'm not going to do it because it's going to be tricky with the camera, but if you're at home, you can just put this in a cold water bath, and that's done. The recipe is for half a liter, but you can just double the recipe, triple the recipe, do a full business out of cashew yogurt. I don't mind. Just this is what you were looking for. So you see that compared to before, it thickens up. It looks very much like a pudding, like like custard. But custard is only starches, and here there is actually also protein denaturation, which also thickens up. If you want just to cook the starches, then you will be to gelatinizing. The proper term would be gelatinization of the starches, and that you actually will be 75 to 85 degrees. That's when you have the most starches changes. So this guy here, I just show you it again. This is what before. It's very runny, even though it's thicker than before. And if you compare after fermenting, it has more viscosity. And this viscosity is by the acidification of the milk, by adding the yogurt cultures and fermenting it. So what I would do here is, it's very hot, it's over 70 degrees, cold water bath, drop to 30 something degrees, add the cultures, and put it in a yogurt machine or something, and then add the yogurt cultures, 8 hours, and then you have yogurt. And this yogurt is it's much better than most of the things that you can buy at the supermarket. And it's really just cashews water and yogurt cultures. There's nothing else. You're just getting properly done, and you get the best product. No agar-agar, no xanthan gum, no whatever else, added sugars. You don't need anything to get this ready. And why I'm talking about the yogurt one is I love it, and the second is because it's the easiest product you can get anywhere, and get the concept of the difference of cooking the milk. And you can, if you want, try to make yogurt by not cooking the milk, and you see that is completely different product. Don't forget you cooked it, so it will reduce the water in it. So let's say I cool down, make the yogurt, 8 hours later I have a yogurt. That's good. Let's talk about the Camembert. It's very similar to what we did here, but the proportion is a bit different. So I had before 200 grams of cashews, 200 grams of 100 grams of cashews. So 1 part of cashews, 4 parts of water. You can up to, if you want a bit more liquidy than this here, more fluid, to make a sauce or something. Then you want 5 parts of cashews of water to 1 part of cashews. So 500 grams of water to 100 grams of cashews. And that's how you get 550 grams for only 100 grams of cashews. You have like a jar of yogurt. So it's a pretty good price. And it doesn't take a lot of work. Like I said, after you get used to the texture you're looking for, you can just do something, stir it, and then you have it. With the cashew, for the camembert, you need to watch out a little bit more. So what I have here, cashew nuts, I measured already. The recipe, like I said, is on the booklet, but it's 200 grams of cashews, 200 grams of water, 400 grams of water, and that's the ratio 2:1. Because you don't want, like the yogurt, you want actually to firm it up, and if you put too much water, then it won't bind enough. It won't get a nice structure. So for me, I find that 2:1 ratio is the highest that you can get, that you can do something about it. If you have something different, yeah, so it might not work that well. And I see that other 8 people are watching, and that's awesome. If you have questions, if you want to comment, I hope that will just pop up and I will see it. So it feels like I'm talking a monologue, so feel free to ask, comment, or anything. I like to see things popping up, and I know that I'm talking to people, but I know that a lot of people will also watch later. So I have here 200 grams of cashews. I add 400 grams of water. I measure also water just to make sure it's exact, because if you just use a measuring cup, it kind of feels like, oh, it's too low, it's too much. I never know, and with the grams or with the scale, you're always right. So I have this, and I'm gonna make the milk. And just like before, I'm gonna cook this milk and work further for the Camembert. So because it's always the same product, I don't mind to wash everything, to rinse it out, or what's left there. I usually just put it in, but that's why I also do usually the yogurt and then the Cashewbert, or I do it the other way around, doesn't matter, but in a way that you don't have a lot inside to mess up the balance. So there was some, I could blend it better. I saw there was some pieces. What I also wanted to say about the milk itself, what I do is just to get, you can with your finger or with your mouth pressing to see how much, if it's like a bit grainy or if it's very smooth, the milk. This is still a bit grainy. You can actually see here a little bit of the grain probably. It's not so smooth, which is fine, but of course I don't want to keep you 1 minute with this noise. But if you're making at home, you don't have a Vitamix or whatever good blender you have, you can just do it long and then stop, check for the texture, if it's grainy or if it's very smooth. If it's very smooth, it's perfect. But it doesn't have to, it just have to be fine enough. This milk, you can see, sorry for the, let me just put this out. It will just dissolve whatever was left here. But what I want to show you is this. So it is pretty runny, and then I want to cook it again to 75 degrees. One thing that I forgot to mention that it just occurred to me is that when you cook, you're also pasteurizing. So before I was blanching the nuts, so put hot water, um, let the drain the hot water, and then make the milk. But now, when you are making this recipe, you are cooking at 72 degrees at least, which is in 15 seconds. Usually you pasteurize the milk, and during the whole process, you are keeping for around 72 degrees, more or less, for long enough. So you for sure pasteurize your milk. So that's also a good way to make sure it will be stable. So now I'm gonna cook this, and in the meantime, I want to give you some hints. So first one is that because of the thicker milk, you need to watch out a little bit more. So what I do is usually when it's about 50 degrees is when I stir it more often. Otherwise, it will just cook in the corners of the pot and it won't mix well. And that's why not a round one, but a square one would be perfect, because then I can just do this straight and then it'll also get in the corners because this is round. So what happens, you have a corner and you have a round, and then always have some thickened cashew milk here and it's lumps, and that's a bit annoying. If you have something square, it will get all the corners and it's perfect. But in my case, whatever, that happens. I don't need to be perfect in this case. So, like I mentioned, also you learn what texture you're expecting. So for the cashew milk in this case, it won't be just a little bit thicker. It will actually get almost like a pudding, like before, like a pudding. So that like a custard texture, a bit thicker than a custard texture actually. And that's when you know, oh, I'm done. I can move forward. So the process is pasteurize the milk, denaturate the proteins about 75 degrees Celsius. Then you put it out, cool down as quick as you can, because then you don't overcook the starches. If it's like 75 to 80 degrees, the starches will start to harden up, and you don't want to cook it too much. So that's why usually you just put it there at cold water bath. Then you add the cultures. So in my case, I'm using my own Camembert cultures, Cashewbert cultures. So you have mesophilic cultures and the Cashewbert cultures. And when you buy them, you get 1/16 of measuring spoon that you can use for adding for a recipe. So this recipe, like I said, all the full recipes on the booklet that you can get at books.cashewbert.com. But then you have the little spoon, you have the powder of the cultures or the liquid cultures, and then per recipe, which is I'm doing here, you need 1 little spoon. And then after this is cooked, cool down to about at least 40 degrees Celsius. 25 degrees Celsius would be great. And then you mix it. And then the second thing that you need, that most recipes don't actually ask for, is the enzyme or transglutaminase. So if you are in North America, there are some options to get from Modernist Pantry, Modernist Cook or something. But then if you look for the group, on the Cashewbert group on Facebook, there is some tips where to get it. This is the enzyme. This is the liquid that I get, but you can get powder. And then if you're using something else, then what we offer, the amount might be different. But what we have is that I ask for 5 milliliters, at least for the spoons that I have also half a teaspoon. It's 2.5 milliliters. That means 1 teaspoon in this case would be 5 milliliters, which is what we are aiming for this recipe. And then, so I'm cooking here. Let me just stir it a little bit. It will take quite a few minutes for this to get ready. And then again, what I would do is to when I reach the temperature that I want, I put it in cold water, cold bath, reach the temperature, add the cultures, mesophilic cultures and thermophilic and enzyme, the transglutaminase, mix everything in a little bit of water. I just usually use something like this, put a little bit of water, add everything, mix it, and add to the paste, and leave it for 2 to 4 hours until it firms up. When it firms up, you can put directly in the cheese form, which is what I'm showing here. And that's exactly what I did. In my case, I have also a lid, but you can cut something. You can just, with the spoon, make it flat. But this would be the cheese you're looking for. And like I said, this is pretty firm. This is a curdled cheese. You can add salt and eat like this. If you just, there is a ricotta recipe also there. It's very mild. It doesn't taste that great, but it's far from a bad cheese. It's pretty good. But because it's cashews, it's still not super firm as would be with almond or tofu, for example. It will be a bit it's still on the creamy side, but you can see that like here you can see that it's still gives up. There is some it itself is not such like a curd, but still a pretty firm and interesting texture. And then what you do with that is salt one side, salt the other side, and then if you have, you can watch my old video from Cashewbert where I show how to care for the cheese. So only the beginning, until you get to here, it's different from the old recipe. From here on, it's the same. So that's what I wanted to bring you today. Let me see how things are going here. So it's starting to cook on the sides, which is a bit annoying. I should have cared for it better, but it's thick up, and I want it to be thick enough so I know, oh, that's about 75 degrees, and like I said, I can just stir it, dissolve it, and make it a bit firmer. So this is the Cashewbert. Those are the reasons why I'm cooking the milk, to get it creamier, to get more flavor, to be firm enough so I can work directly without like the other recipe with a cheesecloth. And that only enables because I'm cooking the milk. If you don't cook the milk, you can look at for the old recipe. It's denser. The mold will grow for much thicker, creating a quite a rubbery, thick rind, and that's something I don't really like on those cheese. If you have more questions, if you don't know about it, most probably you've seen it, but there is a Facebook group for Cashewbert. That's when you can ask questions. And if you want the full recipe of Cashewbert yogurt, blue cheese, and all the other recipes, you can go to books.cashewbert.com or go to cashewbert.com and see where is the book there. Thank you for watching. If you have any more questions, like I said, go to the Facebook group. I will work on this to Cashewbert, continue here in a few minutes. And this video will be available so you can watch anytime on our YouTube channel. So thank you for watching and see you soon.